Welcome back to the Papa Meat channel. How you doing? Come on in and sit on down. Today we're gonna be watching Axe Giant, the Paul Bunyan horror film. You know, I came across this movie because somebody recommended it to me. I saw the cover. I don't know what it is about it, but I love these little parodies. I think it's because I do my own cringy horror parodies. So I love to see how people take these little things and make a nice little twist on them. You know how much I love the Winnie the Pooh one. I mean, oh bother. I hate that I saw this movie. So I figured, God, I bet I will love the Paul Bunyan horror film. But essentially, this is just about a giant Paul Bunyan who kills people in the woods. It's a little indie production. I know it's not a wide-scale production. It's a little indie production from 2013 that was released in a couple theaters. It made like $7 in the box office. So I rented it on Prime, so I did give money to this movie. So you're welcome, Paul Bunyan. Without further ado, let's dive into the complete tragedy that is Axe Giant Paul Bunyan. Now, when I was watching this film, I'll tell you something. I was actually pleasantly surprised because it's a big Paul Bunyan in a very low budget film, which usually it's like a compositing nightmare. But in some of these spots, they built miniatures and like, it looks pretty convincing. Don't get me wrong though. 80% of the time, the compositing doesn't look good. There's a lot of green screen effects. Very obvious, like, oh fuck, we need to reshoot this. So let's get on a green screen. Or anytime they have Paul Bunyan like jump, there's this really funny time where he jumps and it kind of looks like they green screen. They kind of just like zoomed him around a little bit and he landed. Just fun little compositing tricks, which just adds to the nice visual charm. It added more questions when I was like, that shot looks pretty good. Looks pretty well composited. Like I believe that that's a 20-foot tall Paul Bunyan, but we'll get to that. This movie starts in the nice snowy Minnesota forest in 1894. We're introduced basically to a group of loggers who are about to get down on some grub, and one of the loggers is like, you know what? I still gotta cut down more trees. Loggers like to let you know how many trees they cut down. If I was a logger, I would be sure to let you know all the time, and I wouldn't care. I'd be pro fracking, and I'd be pro deep sea drilling for oil. I'd get bored of trees after a while, and I would just go straight for the fucking source, baby. Give me that oil. The logger comes back to see his entire campground killed in a poorly composited mess, and then he meets like some kind of inbred burn victim child wearing a flannel shirt, which you assume to believe is Paul Bunyan in this case. Usually when people talk about Paul Bunyan, he's like a chiseled feature, but they don't ever introduce why he looks different. Paul Bunyan in this is just a monster, and he kills everybody. But to be fair, the movie does start in an exciting way where the guy is tussling with him, and then he gets half of his head ripped in half by a giant table saw. That's a pretty fucking good way to start the movie. It could have been way more boring, but they go way over the top. It looks like a cheesy, terrible mess. So I thought to myself, oh, maybe I'm in for a good ride here. And that's until we get to meet our main cast of characters, which when we get introduced to our protagonist, our main characters, it's 33-year-olds playing teenagers, and it's supposed to be like a rehabilitation army. At first, I thought the guy was a cop, but then he goes into very stereotypical army sergeant mode, yelling at them, saying different kind of quips, using military time. Why do we do military time still? If you were in Pakistan and you said 0500, that's not going to be the same 0500 as in the States. I think you have to fucking figure it out anyway. I don't know. There's going to be some stolen valor hero. We use that for the X, Y, and Z. And that was the same kid picked up by the National Guard coming and talking at their school. Good job, dude. But our main characters are Sergeant A. Hoke. He's our red pill, doom-pilled sergeant who's taking our criminal teenagers into the woods for some strict discipline. We have to bring discipline back into the fucking home. And no better way to do that to introduce that into a Paul Bunyan horror film. We have Miss K. She's like a therapist, I think. They don't really ever say. She's just kind of like, I'm here. We have Marty. They call him Chicken Little. That didn't sit right with me. His crime, and then the fun thing with this scene though is that we get to find out what they did each time, like what's their crime. And we start off immediately with Marty, and he stole $12 million. This is a first-time offender program. I'm gonna just put this out there for any people who haven't committed crimes and don't have a record. If you steal or spend $12 million, you're gonna go to federal prison for like 30 plus years, easy. There's no little cute first-time offender thing. How he had access to $12 million, I don't know. But next up, we have our handsome white guy. His name's Zach, and he was into drug trafficking, and these are supposed to be teenagers. We have Rosa. She's a single mom. She's the MILF of the group. Contempt of court for not wanting to testify for witnessing a murder. There's like a lot of weird sexual tension, obviously, because it's a cheap horror film, so you're gonna have that. But we have a really fun line where Zach says, "Serious MILFage." around a bonfire. That was, once again, it brought me back into the movie. I was very excited after that. We have Trish. She's the sexy redhead who assaulted an officer. She's also the person who shows her tits in this movie, so let's put a counter up here. One pair of tits for this movie, so for a cheap horror film, that's not a lot. You have to commend them for their, not super exploitative. And last but not least, we have CB, who is the oldest looking person in the group, who's supposed to be a teenager, and she was a drunk driver who hit somebody and they were ejected out of their car. After we get introduced, we cut to a scene in the forest where there's a bear. I don't think that a bear and a deer and like all this wild, it's very like, I don't know, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, like, we're out in the woods, look at all this wildlife, when a giant lumbering man, who once again you can only assume is Paul Bunyan, shows up and grabs the bear. It's not a CG bear, so they got an acting bear to stand up, and then you hear like a neck pop, and then the bear lays down as if it's dead, but he's still like rolling around the ground, and the director's just behind the camera, just like, we only got him for 30 minutes. We can only afford 30 minutes. Just skin him. They actually murder the bear right there and skin him. Best actor of the movie, the bear. I liked him. I thought he was cute. It's actually probably credited. Why did they not credit? It's an acting bear. Whatever, dude. We cut back around the campfire. We get to learn deeper into these convicts' lives, which the girl, who's a clearly 43-year-old woman playing a teenager, and she was just kind of drunk when she was driving, but she hit a drunk driver to save somebody else. So the person who flung from the car that she murdered was just a drunk driver, so who cares? She's an angel. And it's kind of funny because everybody in the campfire is like, you're like a hero.
You deserve a medal rather than being here.
That's right.
She's like, yeah, thanks. I was just kind of tipsy. And it's like, you're a monster still. You're a terrible person. We find out that the MILF, she says, I'm a single mom, and the guy, Zach, once again.
Whoa, serious MILFage.
So then the redhead, she assaulted the officer because he was looking at her ass and pussy. Zach, he's the classic jokester here. He looked down at the girl and he's like, you do have a nice ass, after she said that. And then she like looks at him and she's like, oh, nice. Which once again, as the director, I wonder how you do that. So he's gonna say this to you, but you're gonna be turned on by him. With the other guy, it was gross, but with Zach, since he's so hot, Zach, take off your shirt. I mean, look at that. You're gonna be turned on. Is your pussy wet yet? So then Chicken Little, the whole thing was like, oh, you got to spend $12 million. And he was like, it was actually 11.5. Yeah, the FBI likes to round it up. And you're like, okay, so you're not gonna tell us how you got a hold of $11.5 million. I think with the glasses, the director's like, oh, he's a hacker. They're gonna realize it because he's a nerd because he has glasses. It's ambiguous. It's cool. People will know he's a hacker, dude. It's fine. All of a sudden, a homeless man runs out of the darkness, tickles Zach, and then runs away. And it's Joe Estevez, Emilio Estevez's brother. He's on like Decker as the president. He's just like a terrible actor. Everyone else in his family is extremely successful. Like Charlie Sheen's his half brother, Emilio Estevez, fucking Martin Sheen, like all that shit. Emilio Estevez is here, and nobody questions it. No one really cares that happened. But luckily, that's quickly, put to the side because Trish and Zach have a nice fuck scene. He's like, what took you so long? And she's like, shut up and fuck me. And then the therapist, Miss K, she's like, you all broke rules. I'm sorry, but you have to put your cock away and cover your pussy up. So then she gets mad and leaves. So the Marty like wakes up and he's like, what's going on? It'd be funny if he like stood up and he had a huge boner like in his underwear. You snore, dude. And he like runs out of the tent. After the whole big boner scene and stuff like that, we cut to the next day where the sergeant is putting them through a hike.
We're going on a hike!
Everyone's tired, and Miss K says, you wouldn't really leave me, would you? And the absolute Chad-pilled, red-pilled, doom-pilled sergeant says,
oh, absolutely.
He slowly becomes the best character of the movie, I'm pretty sure. At the beginning, you're like, it's too much, but then by this point in the movie, you're like, you're the shining star. Not as close to the bear, but you're still a shining star. So they've probably been actually hiking for, I would assume, an hour. Zach and Marty are like, let's get out of here. Fuck this. And it's once again, you've been out here for an hour. Are you itching that bad to get back? And he's like, fuck this, we're going. This is where we start planting the seeds for Paul Bunyan to start coming in, because Zach and Marty come across a burial ground. They don't really know it's a burial ground, but they come across a cow skull. Looking at the cow skull and like, what the hell is this? And it's like, it's a cow skull. Imagine going wild and you see just a fucking cow skull. Like, what the hell is this? What am I looking at? But it has like obvious plastic horns on it. And he's like, oh, cool, I'm gonna take a souvenir. And he takes off the horn, but there's the actual horn of the skull underneath it. And they just left it. And it's like, that's not how horns work. That it would be, there's no horn inside of a horn. Zach is, he's stoked and he has himself a nice little, he's like, oh, I could use this, a horn. Fucking something's gonna go on with Paul Bunyan because they show show a tiny cross on the ground. Oh yeah, and Zach does say he's gonna make a bong out of it.
I'm gonna make a bong out of this thing.
Oh, yeah.
Zach gets pussy. He's cool kid.
I'm 420 friendly, and I skate, and I can do anything. And I'm really...
We cut back to the alcoholic girl's dad in a bar. It's like, how many characters do you have to introduce in this fucking film? By this point, I was like, who is this? Why are we in this bar in this small town? And essentially, the dad is just worried about his daughter, who's the alcoholic who murdered someone. She has a problem, and now she owns a bar. Good life choices, dude. I raised her right, my little girl. She's my little flower. God, I love her. But luckily, we cut back, and essentially, we get our first Paul Bunyan encounter. Trish is looking at her cell phone, and Paul Bunyan just walks up and cuts her in half. And it's actually pretty awesome. People are like, oh my God! And they all start running away. And Paul Bunyan, it's a normal sized guy that they've composited up to be huge. On the close-ups they do, it just looks like a regular guy. And he's just like... Which is like, why can't Paul Bunyan talk? He looks a little disfigured, but the dude should be able to fucking speak. Essentially, we find out through this movie that it's just a story of Frankenstein. He chops a tree down, and it hits Rosa, and she gets knocked down, and in a hurry, everybody just kind of scatters. Paul Bunyan does catch up to our hero, the sergeant, and he does cut him in half, and it's very sad. Until you find out that the sergeant is still completely articulating, and he's talking to the group, and he's using a distraction, he is cut in half. And he's like, hey, idiot! But it doesn't read like it's supposed to be funny. I think it's supposed to be like he's heroic. I mean, it's really stupid. It comes off as funny, but I think the director was like, he's like a hero. So the kids go back to the regular cabin that they were staying at, and Marty tries hot wiring the car, and he does it like twice, and then Miss Kay's like, let's get out of here, and it's like, just give him a second, he'll start the car.
I can do it. I just need more time.
But as they run back inside, you see the giant composite Paul Bunyan drag the van off. We don't ever see the van again. He kind of just drags it somewhere. And our hero sex icon, Zach, he's a little broken down at this moment. I mean, he's not doing too good. He's holding a knife, but he's holding the blade of it, and he's like twisting it. So there's just like blood everywhere. He's like jacking this knife off. The 57-year-old alcoholic woman's like, oh my God, Zach, you're cutting your hand. And she wraps it up, and once again, there's more sexual tension. And I just kept thinking to myself, is Zach's gonna try to have sex with every single person in this movie? So Joe Estevez breaks up this sexual tension, thank God, with a big explosive understanding of who Paul Bunyan is, which the movie started in 1894. So I don't know how he has this information, but he knows everything there is to know about Paul Bunyan in this forest. Which essentially, Paul Bunyan was born from loggers with a weird birth mutation, outcast in his town. People fucking hated him. But the girl who's the alcoholic in the group, she looks just like a person he loved. It's like a weird thing where he was 6 years old in the beginning of the movie, but he looks like a full-grown man. So it was like he's just like a 6-year-old who was horny from some girl in town. It's like, it doesn't really make any sense, which, you know, it's a Paul Bunyan film, but still, I was just like, Joe Estevez, what the fuck are you even on, dude? Essentially, it just kind of ends on this note where Paul Bunyan wants to have sex with you. And everyone's just like, I thought that's Zach's thing. There's so much sexual tension in this cabin. It's all just kind of like, it's an act. It's something that's probably gonna happen. Joe Estevez also talks about the loggers at the beginning that were murdered by Paul Bunyan. You find out that they actually killed his blue ox, Baby Blue. Is the folk tale coming back to you yet? I don't know. Paul Bunyan's blue ox, which is a 3D model walking around the forest. The guy smiles, shoots it in the face, and they're eating the blue ox at the beginning. So that's why he freaked out. So Joe Estevez says to Zach, he's like, you gotta give that horn back. So Joe, like the sex fiend that he is, goes outside and he's like, take it. And he throws the horn, and we have one of the weirdest, I mean, I had like almost a panic attack watching this. It's like in the air, and it does like this flip transition to where you see the night sky, but it falls in reverse. It makes no sense the way that they edited it. Zach starts to walk back inside. Here comes the horn back, impaling him in the chest. Once again, you're like, ah, what a fallen soldier. Paul Bunyan drags him into the forest, and he's just like, you hear Zach very pathetically just say, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
But then you just remember that it's Paul Bunyan. After Zach heroically dies, Joe Estevez says, you know, there's a reason that Paul Bunyan didn't rip you in half. It's because you look like his long-lost love from 150 years ago. He's probably gonna have sex with you. So another kind of large bombshell goes off right there, where you're like, are we gonna see a 20-foot Paul Bunyan sex scene? Is that something that exists in the universe? And if so, how can I avoid that? This is the real question. But in the cabin, as they're talking, Paul Paul Bunyan comes back and he starts destroying the cabin. Starts absolutely tearing it apart, which is this is one of the parts of the movie where I was like, this looks pretty good. I was very surprised. They built a miniature. I was like, why didn't we have more of this? It looks like a giant Paul Bunyan destroying a house. You have scenes where it's so easily like a green screen, and they just like, you could tell they just went into Adobe and did color key, and they just clicked a button and it just looked, and they put a JPEG behind it. If you compare the one like the dinner bell scene with the green screen along with the compositing and like all the shadows and stuff with him smashing the miniature, you're just like, why didn't you just take more time with the dinner bell scene? You know, we're not winning Oscars with Axe Giant, but still, it looks fine. So now there's chaos because Paul Bunyan destroyed the house, everyone's out, and the MILF gets grabbed and he throws her, and it turns into a really funny 3D ragdoll. So they keep switching between the actual actress and this 3D model that's like all stiff. I think it's like a PNG. She just dies, but it's really, that was one of the funniest moments in the movie, is watching that ragdoll. Marty is upset because the MILF is dead because she's a sexy MILF, and he's like, you son of a bitch, come get me, and tries distracting him. But luckily the alcoholic in a drunken rage shoots Paul Bunyan right in the eye, and he's like, "Rrr." Remember the dad from earlier in that one bar scene that we talked about? He's here now, and he shoots like 7 tranquilizers in Paul Bunyan, and he falls into the house. I feel like you would need more than 7 tranquilizers to take down this 20-foot tall fucking ogre. But he falls into the miniature, and it looks pretty rad. It's like a weird Godzilla callback. That's what it kind of felt like, was like a weird kaiju kind of old 50s, 60s Japanese fucking monster movie. But there's a weird editing part though as he's falling. You know, like the stereotypical, it's like a meme now where an explosion happens and they show it from like 6 different angles. They tried doing that with Paul Bunyan falling down, but they used the same camera angle like 3 times. So it kind of just looks like he's falling and then goes back up and falls again. So it kind of just looks like caught in this loop. But now, since they're free from Paul Bunyan, he's tranquilized. They try to run off, but who stops him? Joe Estevez. Joe Estevez is gonna kill him. Uh-oh, betrayal. Which the reasoning that Joe Estevez is going to shoot them is that Paul Bunyan's just a child and he feels bad for him. Even though this whole movie, Joe Estevez has been running in fear away from him. Marty doesn't realize what guns are apparently and runs up and grabs the shotgun barrel and just gets shot in the stomach. Kenny has a funny moment where he's like, is it bad? And it's like, Marty, you got shot point blank with a shotgun in the stomach. Yeah. You're gonna die, Marty. I don't know what I'm supposed to tell you. As Marty dies, the sheriff dad has a fun quip because he sees Paul Bunyan getting up and grabbing his giant axe, and he fucking like boomerang throws it, and they all get down, and Joe Estevez gets his head cut off, and it lands. It's like, and it's their big escape of Paul Bunyan. God damn it, he's right on their trail. He's a big guy and he's coming fast. They get back in the dad's car. The dad looks at the daughter and he's just like, I mean, he just gives her the keys, but in my mind, he was just like, I think you can do this. I hope you can keep this on the road for 5 minutes. Can you do that, sweetie? Daddy has some McCormick's underneath his driver's seat, or some Smirnoff. You want some Smirnoff? As they're driving, she's going very slow, but it's like a really funny composited, like they put the Paul Bunyan actor on just a green screen and have him just walk, and they're just like tweening him forward. They're shooting him. They're trying to get Paul Bunyan away. This is a big character turn for CB. She's drunk probably, and she's driving and she's becoming a better person. The weird thing too is the sheriff is shooting him like 20 times. These are tiny bullets, he's a big guy, so you don't really think much of it. But they go to like a bridge or something like that, and Paul Bunyan has trapped them on this bridge. And it seems like all hope is lost because here comes this giant Paul Bunyan that's gonna kill our protagonist. Remember the drunk guy from earlier? Remember those characters that mean nothing from earlier? They come back and then they shoot Paul Bunyan like 100 times. But it was what happened with the 20 bullets earlier? Anyways, this movie really crescendos at the end. Very reminiscent of Frankenstein. If a person with Down syndrome wrote Frankenstein, that's kind of what Paul Bunyan Axe Giant would be, which is kind of entertaining. They gun him down in a very funny montage where it's so long. I mean, it rivals that scene in Platoon where Willem Dafoe gets shot right as they're trying to be like airlifted out of this battle. It is more excessive than that. I mean, it is a lot of shots. He gets shot in the head like 7 times and does like, and they keep cutting to it. But then in a tragic Frankenstein way, Paul Bunyan looks to the drunk girl. He basically says the girl's name and he falls into the lake. And I think you're supposed to feel bad. But the movie doesn't do anything to really warrant you humanizing him. Like, there's a moment in the flashback where people are being mean to him and like spitting on him, but it's after he murders 9 people. It's not like he's just like getting milk in town and people are like, fuck you, freak. So at the end of the movie, it is like a touching moment where it's like, oh, maybe he's just an animal living in the forest, and animals do what it's just an animal way. How can you blame an animal for killing people in nature when that's just what they do? That's what they're born to do. He's just a monster. I mean, I'm just to say. And then you think that there's gonna be another act or another scene trying to finalize it up, but no, the movie just says, and we're done. So there's no touching moment or like no intrigue of like, did Paul Bunyan leave? Who knows? Is there gonna be a sequel? Well, it's been about 10 years and there's still no sequel, so I think that they kind of knew. Listen, for an American folktale horror film, we've seen a lot worse on this channel. I would say it's better than Winnie the Pooh. I mean, to be fair, the costume isn't the greatest thing, but it's not the worst. I mean, it's like, it's pretty interesting. I would say they effectively do enough with this like forest environment to make it kind of fun. There's plenty of like stupid one-liners. The acting is just bad enough and the script is awful to really warrant some funny, visceral laughs out of it. All in all, Axe Giant, I was pleasantly surprised. I thought it was gonna be really boring, but it ended up being quite the conversational piece. It's one of those movies where if you watch it with somebody, you guys are kind of talking about what's happening, and it's a fun watch. So you should have a Paul Bunyan night where you all wear flannels and you eat pancakes with maple syrup and all that shit. That'd be a fun night, a little Paul Bunyan themed night. If you watch this by yourself, you're a sadist. It would be torture to watch these kind of movies by yourself. But that's Paul Bunyan's Axe Giant. I think I learned a lot from this film. I think I learned how to cut down a tree. I think I learned how to be a man and how to be a monster and kill people and get away with it for a while until I get gunned down on a bridge. I learned how to have sex from ZACK. So thank you, ZACK. Thanks for watching the video. I would never watch another Paul Bunyan horror film. This is not gonna be a recurring thing. Hey guys, be sure to check out my trading cards I have available in the style of Garbage Pail Kids. Each pack comes with all 17 cards, but the first 1,000 people get a Melvin card. We're talking about Yokai Bob the Builder. We got the Elon Musk as the bird. All kinds of crazy cards here. You can look at these. Ooh, oh my God. Oh, that's a good one. This sale goes until June 28th, so be sure to pre-order yours now. Thanks.